Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World on the fabulous solstice. I have my festive hat on today.
Yes, you do. I have my Christmas cup. That's about as Christmassy as I got today, at least on this.
Yeah. So, yeah, we have a lot on this. This has been like the whole week we were talking about. So anyway, you want to talk, funny enough, we were like, oh my gosh, we're actually going to be online on exactly at 9:30. And then we started talking again and we got late. And then it was like, it bounces off. And I was like, oh, look at that. We're not supposed to get on ever till, 25 up. Anyway,
Right.
so you wanted to start talking about your dream. You said you had a dream that was disconcerting last night.
Yeah, and it was early this morning. And it was, I'm still trying to get the message behind it because I know it's not what it played out to be, but it was, I had taken my daughter's dog who lives in the house with us, to it was like a dog park, but it was in a house and the dogs were playing and everything. And I lost him. And I was frantic because I was like, he was just right there. And then he was gone. And I mean, and it was the kind of dream where, you can't get the phone to dial.
Oh, right.
And you can't get back to a place where you'd been. And and then I couldn't find the door out. And then I couldn't find the person that I came with. And it was just one thing after another. And it turned out that because I had seen him in what it reminded me of is a ball pit, like that you take your kids to, but it was empty, but it was a big pit. And I knew I'd have to climb down and get him out. And when I went back, the pit was empty. And then somebody said, oh, well, that was the trash pit. And that just cratered me to think that I had allowed this dog that I care so much about to be thrown away like trash. So that just really started unraveling the rest of my morning. And my sister had sent me a video on, it was a Saturday Night Live video about Christmas morning. And, everybody's opening packages and it's like the kids are getting, gift after gift after gift. And the dad's getting gift after the gift after gift. And the mom gets a bathrobe. And then the kids get more gifts and the dad gets more gift. And mom goes, oh, and I love my bathrobe. And it just keeps going and going. And I love my bathrobe. And then it's like, oh, and I'll go cook breakfast in my bathrobe. And then it's like, oh, I burned my arm in my bathrobe. And then it's like, oh, look, more packages under the tree. And she's like, oh, you shouldn't have. And they go, oh, no, they're for the dog. And so then it's stockings. And it's like, the mom's stocking's empty. Because, typically it's the mom that does the stockings. So why would she do her own?
Yeah.
So her stocking was empty and it was like, oh, more gifts in the stockings. And she's like, oh, mine's empty. And my sister had sent it to me and she goes, I laughed till I cried because she said that's exactly the way it is at my house. And I started thinking about that. And it's not that it's that way at my house, but it made me wonder, is that how I treated my mother?
Well, it's funny that you say that because it reminds me of all of the family videos that I watched of Scott's family as he was growing up. Right. And it was a standing joke with my father-in-law of like, oh, so why do you think the marriage didn't work out?
Right. So I started looking at all that and what I ended up bringing it back to is, since all of that is all a reflection of what's going on inside me, all that is, where am I not showing up for myself?
Well, and that's a big one. Good morning, Yasmin, Annette, and Nicole. Yeah, and so it's a great place. That is a great place to start. And, it's interesting. I can see how it ties in with the dream that you had, right?
Right.
So what we started talking about last week was this whole idea. And, of course, coming into this season, you have the whole Christmas idea and you have, the Jesus thing. I mean, even like so many different practices have this whole sacrifice and martyrdom thing as like the epitome of spirituality and, you know, enlightenment, when actually it's quite the opposite.
Right. Right. Right.
From our understanding anyway. And so, you know, we've been talking the last several weeks about, you know, like this all being complete and us, you know, being done cycling around. And the way to do this is the opposite of what we think. It's not to fight the battle anymore. It's to come to that oneness and wholeness and realize it's all of us and all this kind of stuff. So in that process, one of the core energies that it's really time for us to give up is sacrificing ourself, you know, martyring ourselves.
Right.
Because really, when we do that with the idea that other people will believe us to be more enlightened,
Right.
more spiritual, more whatever, right? Good morning,
More
Gloria.
worthy.
Yeah, more worthy. And so, you know, I had multiple conversations over the past week. Kim says, I keep getting, how do I choose me? Like in relationships, right? And
Exactly.
that's the whole thing, you know, like in the last week, I've had so many conversations about these ideas of sacrificing. You know, I had somebody come in. It was interesting. So there are several things. There was one person that I met this weekend, and I was giving to like an angel tree thing, and I was dropping off the stuff, and I was talking to this person, and then they were like, oh, well, they were telling me about they had this whole like sort of crap for the last 3 years and da da da. But they weren't saying it. They weren't saying it like, oh, well, it's me, but almost,
Right.
you know, it was like, oh, like this is this and da da da. And then a part of me felt like, oh, I should be bringing you something. Like, you know, it's so funny.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, wait. And then the guidance was like, no, because this is what you're guided to do. That is their choice, as is whatever your choices are, right? And it's like, well, that's a very complicated thing for the mind to unravel, right?
It is. It is. It is.
And so, you know, we go through this thing of sacrifice and martyrdom, and we think, you know, I had people, just people that I've spoken to in the past week, and a lot of conversations have been about, oh, well, I did this and I knew it was for the greater good, or I knew it was for the greater good, and I suffered for it.
See, and I've finally gotten my mind switched around to where the only thing that I acknowledge, not I acknowledge, the only thing I feel is for the greater good is me helping me. And I don't
Right.
mean that from the perspective of at the expense of others.
Right. And we go
Me
into things.
helping me for others.
Mhm.
So nobody else has to help me. They can help themselves.
Right. Right. Well, no, but here's the thing. That's what we think is not, that's not very nice. It's so very selfish and self-centered. It's like, well, it is, but it's also freeing the other people. This is what we forget. It's
Right.
also freeing the other people to complete their journeys, right?
Right.
So we talk about listening to guidance over everything else, right? So, oh, I have so many examples of that over the years I've been doing this, that I've been talking to individuals, you know, I've talked about this, people who are very wealthy, who feel guilty about feeling wealthy, that they don't send
Right.
enough or do enough. And then I'm like, and oh, well, every time I see somebody who needs, I do, da, 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 da. And I'm like, well, do you ask your guidance? Is it for me to do that?
Right. Right.
And sometimes you get no. I
Right.
always ask, right?
And I've gotten in really good practice of asking guidance when it comes to my adult children. It's
Mhm.
like, because immediately, you want to rush in.
Yes, because that's the whole epitome of being a mother, right? Is like
Right.
sacrificing for your kids and da 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 da, and you know, like,
Putting their needs ahead of yours.
and being their savior and all that kind of stuff, right? Or what we believe culturally. Yeah, you're right. And it's been a long road for me too. Like, and as adults now, it's funny. What's great though, it's funny that you say that. And I think what has been awesome is the last 2 years, my kids have done stockings for me and my husband at Christmas. Like they fill up our stockings, you know. And I was like,
That's
that's
great. That's great.
really cool that they just sort of picked that up. And I was like, nice, that's fun. But the whole thing is like, here's the basis of this understanding, you know. If I focus on loving me, on loving and nurturing, nourishing me to be the best me there is to be, right? Yes, and this is what I'm going to say,
Yeah,
Gloria. Look,
exactly.
you cut me off right at the pass. That's what I was about to
Right.
say. When I am nourishing me and I feel nourished and nurtured and in a place of love, of the universe and myself and all that kind of stuff, then I freely give to others. I think I have freely given to so many people this year, more than I have ever done before. And
Same
it's not with expectation. It's not with like, oh, look at me. It's just like, no, I feel like doing this. Like
or I feel I owe you this. It's more of I feel so good, I want to share that.
exactly, which is a completely different energy
It
of,
is.
what, I feel so good. Yeah, that's a perfect way of saying it. I feel so good. I want to share myself. I want to share
Exactly.
all of this abundance and love and blessings that I have, because I feel so great about where I am as the divine being that I am. And I want to celebrate you in that reflection of me,
Right.
which
Right.
is so freeing, right? And so fun and enjoyable, because then you're not expecting anything in return. You don't believe there's an obligation. There's not like, oh, I did that for you, you have to do it for me.
Right.
It's no, I just feel like doing this. I
Right.
might
No
not do it.
strings attached.
Yes. And so, you know, that's a basic place to start. So we can start there, and then it's for us to like translate that to everything, right? So, there's somebody that I spoke to, and we were talking about um sacrifice and a pattern in their life.
Mm-hmm.
A session had to do with sacrifice, because of they believed they were doing the greater good and blah blah blah, but every time it was they ended up getting hurt, or um in a deficient situation because
Right.
of it, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, for all the spiritual work you've done and all of this stuff that's come up, or they've gone to all these psychics, and these psychics have said, oh, do this, when she felt like, I should, I'm to do this. I'm like, did you ever once stop and ask yourself, is that my truth?
Right.
And the response was no. And I'm like, well, that's all you got to do. And that's that whole trust in your guidance and stuff. And that takes away the egoic should and shouldn't. And like, does it make me look like a good person? We've
Right.
got to, it's time for us to stop that, because when we say, does it make me look like a good person? That's judgment, and that's based on ego, right? And you ask 20 people, what's a good person? And you'll get 20 different answers.
Right. All from their perspective through their wounds.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just to know that that's what that is, right?
Right.
So, this is really super important, because, and it's taking away this energy of, it's so selfish to be, nurturing of yourself. It's so
Right.
selfish to put yourself first. It's so selfish to prioritize yourself. But yet, when you prioritize yourself, then all you do is prioritize like that effusion of love and sharing and oneness, because then that's all that reflects back to you.
And
And
it becomes so overwhelming for yourself that you have no choice. It's just a natural state to share that. And
yeah.
until we can get to that place, everything's going to be forced.
Mm-hmm.
And like we've talked about before, how there's whenever we come to a place in time where there's such a division in people's beliefs and thoughts, that it takes a war to reunite. But the war simply just says, I win, you lose.
And perpetuates duality.
And therefore it's only a temporary situation until it becomes unacceptable again. It
Right.
means nothing's resolved.
Mm-hmm.
So this overrides that state. It
Yeah.
overrides that state by saying that I can't help but feel this gratitude and love and overwhelming oneness
Mm-hmm.
with everyone and everything.
Yes. Because I feel so good from here.
Right.
Here. And it's not because you tell me I'm good. It's not because anybody tells me I'm good. It's because I know I am infinitely divine. And I know that I always am. I have never not been. And so therefore, we were talking last week about, well, I'm really an illusion, because we are all illusion, the illusion as part of separation in the whole, right? But
Right.
we are the whole, right?
Right.
So it's all pieces and parts are the whole too. And so, when we get to that place, You know, we always talk about when we always go to parenting and stuff, because that's the biggest sacrifice, you've got, like, that we talk about, right?
Right.
And part of what I've been pushed through, because my kids are in their early mid-20s now, right? So I've been doing this for actively for, more than a decade now. So it took them through most of their teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
What a lesson for me in being guided to step back and be like, okay, is it for me to say yes or no here? Is it for me to allow this or
Right.
to not allow it? And sometimes I got guidance that was, yes, actually, yes, allow that, when I was surprised, right? And then there were times that I will get no, no, guide this, like, or suggest this instead or whatever. And it was such a great lesson for me. But then there are still times where you think, okay, why, like, oh, because you want your kids to be happy, obviously, right? You want your kids to do well and da, da, da. So when they're having a hard time, you just want to, like, what can I do to help? And, like, so
Right.
I can make it better. We don't make it better.
Right. No, we just delay it or send them down a path that they might not normally have gone down.
Right. And so it's
And
very
how's that
important.
serving them?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing is, so sometimes we do something that we think we are expected to do, right? Because that's what a parent would do, or because, we say we love them, so we want to do for them, right? And so when we do that, sometimes we just perpetuate them delaying where they're going to get on their journey because we're
Right.
praying for them over and over again. And so,
Yeah.
of course,
And
there's a time.
Gloria brings up that there can be resentments attached to that,
Yeah.
which is, you prevented me from doing what I needed to do. And
Yes.
now it's got to be bigger.
Yes.
Granted, both sides have choices, but
And by the way, well, because you did that, now this is what happened and it's your fault.
right, a victimhood,
And
exactly.
now I'm a victim, which
Right.
is also our choice in our lesson. So there's all this interconnectedness, right?
Right.
So, going back to Kim saying, how do I choose me in relationships, right? That's a big challenging one, because we're taught if you love somebody, you'll tolerate them,
Right.
you'll do this, you'll do that. What's really interesting. So my sister, who I don't think I've really ever brought her up on these publicly, is a psychologist. So she and I are in very similar fields, but very different, like from a different perspectives, right?
Right.
So she, in her company, they're starting to do some online psychology courses to help people, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on this year, right? So
Right.
when I saw her put up this weekend that was about getting out of toxic relationships, that
Mhm.
it's okay to put yourself first, that it's okay to leave, that, that you don't have to tolerate da 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 da, right? And so
Right.
she had this stuff, and I saw this slew of comments underneath it. Well, that's not very Christian, or that's not what it says in the Bible, and it's just, and people were just going on and tearing that up, and I'm going, like, wow, well, glad she got such a response.
Right.
But I'm like,
Right.
it was like, wow, that we still believe that. Well, yeah, because that's what we have exalted the idea of sacrificing yourself, like, oh no,
Right.
you're supposed to, being the exalted individual. I'm not even going to say Christian or any religion, it's just being the exalted individual is, oh, just tolerating everybody, and blah blah blah, and it doesn't matter, like, how they treat you, and that'll put you in heaven over them. And like we have really exalted that
Right.
sacrificial thing, right? And so that's some of the most challenging things about, like, so looking at that from the perspective of the psychology course that she's doing, and also from my perspective of how many times I've worked with individuals over the past decade on leaving a relationship that was not serving them,
Right.
right? Where they had sacrificed themselves so much that they felt like there was nothing left,
Right.
or put up with stuff, or contest, or even to conceive of the idea of, oh, I can leave this because we
Right. Right.
so ingrained it in our egos that, oh, to be a good person, I have to tolerate this, and oh, I have to martyr myself, and then, and that'll put, I don't know, good points in my basket. I just am
Right.
not sure. But
Well,
it was an
I know what I've focused on when it comes to conflict in a relationship or whatever is what is there for me to glean from this or learn
right.
from this, so I don't have to repeat it again.
Well, and that's the big one, right? It's like, okay, so the important thing is, of course, and it is funny because because I've been called on this sometimes. You've said that, this is what I've been told as well. You've said that if you're in the right place of self-love and self-nurturing, you could interact with anybody and it won't affect you in any negative
Right.
way. And so I've had people say that to me, and like who are defending staying in a toxic relationship. And then my response was, yes, that is actually true, except why do you want to if you truly are nurturing yourself and
Exactly.
focusing on self-love, right?
Right.
Why do
Exactly.
you want to continue in that? And no, and if your answer then is for that person, it's like, well, then there's your sacrifice right there, right? So, and Gloria says it's so draining to be in those relationships. Yeah, it is, and it depletes you, like the well runs dry, right? And that's where
Yes.
the self-worth goes down and all that kind of stuff. And so here's the thing. Always, again, step back and ask, is it for me to leave or is it for me to stay? Not should I, because should is ego, and ego has a filter of like, good or bad. The question is it for me to stay? Is it for me to go?
Right. Right.
And then trusting that the universe supports you in either way. I mean, there have been times, there have been challenging times over the years where I've asked that question, and it's like, okay, well, stay or go. I mean, it's just, and
Or
sometimes,
not yet.
or not yet, right, right now.
Yeah, because it's a constant reassessment as everyone shifts.
Yes,
And
yes,
as you do the self work and as you discover about yourself and you do the self love and nurturing, it shifts, it changes, it
and
becomes so different.
and by the way, it's not just romantic relationships we're talking about. We're talking
Oh,
about all
absolutely.
kinds. I'm talking about like friendships
Right.
and like peer, relationships and stuff, because sometimes it's time to go.
Right. Right. And even business relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So, and it's not, because like I meet so many people who they're so drained in a relationship, but they're like, oh, but I've been best friends with this person since we were 10 years old, and it's like, except you might have just outgrown each other, or you might
Yeah.
have just
Or,
it's
or
just
your friendships evolve to the point where instead of being on top of each other all the time, it's a Christmas card.
right. Well, yeah, and it happens, and it's not
Right.
bad.
No, it's not bad.
And
It's just
here's this sort of this gives us a great segue into, Michael says, are you able to choose which shifts to take, or has it already been decided at a higher level? Well, you at a higher level have already decided what
right.
shifts you're going to take. So yes, for both. That's my understanding anyway. Right. So this leads to the doorway, though, of this whole, many times we hold on to things from so long ago, right?
Right.
Say, oh, I have to because of this, or I can't because of this, or we say I have to stay connected to this person because of biological relationships, because we're blood related, right? Because we're
Right.
right. Because they're my parent, they're my sibling, they're my whatever, all kinds of stuff. So here's the thing. One of the biggest things for us to really remember to start living is this understanding that time is only a construct and there is nothing but right now.
Right.
And that's where you and I were talking about this kidney thing. So, okay, weird, like a little digression here. Not really, because it's all related.
It is. It is all tied together.
So for anybody who doesn't know, I take Kung Fu have been doing martial arts for years. But anyway, Kung Fu is great, Shaolin Kung Fu, because it incorporates a lot of body, mind, spirit stuff. So I went to a meditation class last week, and we're sitting there, and I like doing that because even though I teach it, it's great to always do different forms and try different, because it helps you sometimes get perspectives that you don't get in your own practice, right? It helps us.
Right.
So I was sitting in the class, and we were doing this very, very traditional Chinese meditation, with the yin yang, with the fire and water. We were working through, and the way in that martial arts, you're focusing on expanding into organs, right? So we're doing this thing where we're going through these organs and these different colors, and then we get to the kidneys. And this is what started the conversation with you and me.
Right.
So we get to the kidneys, and I was like, oh, yuck. Like, it was such a weird thing. And I was like, all I was guided to do was like really push through with this like orange light. And it was like expanding through. And I felt like it was very collective, because it felt like this is way bigger than me. Right. And then I felt it was like there were these weights on the back of it, on the back of the kidneys. And I was like, oh my God, that feels so burdened. Right. And it was like, and so you and I were talking about that the next day.
Yeah, because my dog has kidney issues.
And then it's like everybody you said you talked to last week is like, oh, this kidney, this person's pet had a kidney infection. This person is having lower back pains. And it's so interesting that I'm like, yeah, because suddenly it's the kidney thing. It's like, well, so what is that about? And I was like, okay, well, when we talk about the kidneys in that perspective from the Asian culture, it was like, allowing the yin and yang balance, right? The fire and water balance, which then of course brought up the water flame that I haven't talked about in ages, right? That came.
Right. Well, and they're the organs responsible for filtering the body and keeping homeostasis.
Right. Yes. And Yasmin's like, oh, wow, because I know Yasmin's had a kidney thing for how long, right?
Right.
So, and it's also about holding on to stuff that hasn't flushed out.
Right. Which, if we look at that in all the baggage that we're carrying forward, and all the memories and the thoughts and the regrets and the resentments and everything else that we're weighing them down and dragging forward through this time that doesn't exist.
Yes.
To keep them in the present,
right?
To keep them alive.
Exactly. And we keep to keep creating them again and again and again.
Every minute.
Yeah. So so then you and I were talking about this, and then we went back to one of the sessions we did in Washington several weeks ago. We had our little conclave where, you saw history just erased.
Right.
And there was such a physical shift in you when you saw that, like your body changed, you relaxed, and it was like, oh, it's like, it's
I can let go of that. I cannot be defined by that every morning when I wake up.
Yeah. And
it's like putting on a different meat suit.
Right. And so, we're getting to this place of, for us to really shift into what's next, is for us to truly allow ourselves to let go of the history. Because you know what, that weekend we looked in the collective as well as the individual about coming to resolution with ceasing to exist, right? Mm-hmm. Being an illusion, recognizing that the individual is an illusion and ceasing to exist when this is all complete, which is the fear of the ego, right?
Right.
So then what does the ego do? Holds on history. Oh, but look at what I've done, and look what I've done, and da 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 da. And now I'm going to perpetuate that because I'm going to just continue to build these stories around me in the history and in the future and everything else. And part of it has to do with in that particular session, it was like, okay, let's just erase history like that, because we do and can, because it doesn't really exist except in what we've created in the illusion anyway, right?
Exactly.
And that's not just here. This is all across the multiverse. Now, here's the thing. The ego goes, oh no, I'm not letting go of this.
I've invested so much in this. How dare you?
Don't you dare flush this out of me. No, no, we're at least going to hold on to it in the physical, which is what's the flushing organs? the
The
kidneys.
kidneys. Exactly.
So that's the biggest, that's like the thing is to say, okay, I'm going to allow. And not only allow, but I claim this. I
Right.
claim myself as complete, as present, as
And that's nourishing.
yes, that is the ultimate nourishment.
Right.
And then when we do that, we come to the table of I experience you as a new individual in every moment.
Right.
And then there's no expectations. There's no history, there's no sacrifice, there's no what. We come to the table as equally divine, as equally present, as equally complete,
Right.
and
No needs.
no needs. How freeing and beautiful that is, right?
Talk about a Christmas gift for yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
Or Yule, being that it's solstice today, depending on what
That's
you
true.
practice,
That's true. What isn't this the darkest day of the year?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's looking into that dark, deep crevice to say, yep. And I did that. We all did that. Like,
I know.
that's the thing is to say, oh yeah, look at that. And look at how beautiful it is, as we saw that weekend, the black diamond that Yasmin saw. That's,
Right.
the black, and we could say, oh, that's gross or disgusting, but we can say, this is incredibly beautiful. Look at what we have created and look at what we continue to create, and we can free ourselves to create. I mean, think about what we recreate in every moment through holding on to history and how
Oh,
much energy that actually takes. It's just mind-blowing.
it really is. Really is.
I sort of have to expect my fingers to start disintegrating like in the way Lucy.
Lucy, right.
So Gloria said, but in regards to what Michael said, isn't it both? Because we do not knowingly know what has been chosen for us. Well, it's equally both, being that we choose and it's been decided, meaning our higher self is decided. There's nothing
Right.
that's been chosen for us that's outside of our domain, because we are the divine and we are, different levels of that concentric consciousness. So we create in every, my understanding is we create everything, right? And it's even if we don't remember it,
Mm-hmm.
we have chosen a path, we've chosen a journey, we've chosen, and we've actually, in the infinite ability. So here's the other thing that many forget. This is another little digression, but it's really related. We have so many different ways we could go today, but in the choice of creation, we make infinite choices. So the meaning is I don't just choose one way of doing it, I do all of them.
Right. Exactly.
That's where we have all these parallel timelines. We play out every option. It's just what your consciousness is in this moment, and the partition of you in this timeline and this existing set of dimensions
Right.
right now. And so when we say, okay, well, I've chosen everything, I choose in this timeline, I choose in this particular set, or how about I just complete all the sets, and then I have nothing. When we do that, we realize I have nothing that's outside of me. There's no lack, there's no choice that I didn't make.
Right.
That's exclusion and separation. And by the way, it all depends on how far you want to go up into consciousness, because if we look at not just the individual soul as having all these different levels, but we start looking at each other and realizing we're all just different facets of our own consciousness. Well, of
Right.
course we make all the choices, because look at everybody around us. That's why we create.
Right. Right. Yep.
And why would I want to sacrifice this choice of mine so that you can't complete your choice of yours?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's like looking in a fun house, like the mirror room, where you have the mirrors.
The hall of mirrors.
It's like when you have the mirrors on opposite sides and you look down and you see the infinite, reflections. Oh God, that reminds me of that dimension. That dimension I saw that time. Oh, that just brought that back.
That was March.
Yeah, that was in March. So there's so many, like, it's interesting. It's almost like we've unlocked something, and it's challenging for us to pinpoint this very specific thing because it all connects to everything, right?
Right.
But
Right.
here's the thing, kidney issues, any issues with that, like, it's to look at, can I, let me allow myself to flush out the history I'm holding on to in my physical body.
Right.
That's a place to start.
Right. And that is, I know that's what I've spent most of the weekend doing. And it was at moments challenging
Mhm.
physically, with headaches and things like that. But I knew, I knew at the cellular level that this is what I needed to do. And it's
Yeah.
almost like once you open that box, you can't shut it again.
Right. Like, oh, why would I want it? That feels icky.
Right, right, exactly. It's like you see it for what it is,
Yes.
not what you used to believe it was.
Well, and then once we let go of that history and allow ourselves to flesh it out, and it's like, well, the ego goes, what do you mean? And then it grieves and it mourns the history. I mean, and we can look at that at the individual level. We can look at it at the cellular level. We can look at it at the collective level of the entire set of, dimensions here on Earth, on the entire project multidimensionally, on the multiverse. Like, we can look at all of it and mourn what we've created, because we have created this ego of identification, which has been the job, right? Its purpose
Right,
to explore. And then, in that we've created pride, and in that we've created, like, certain kinds of love and also hate.
right,
And in doing that, we have created this idea of what's better or worse, what's good or bad. And we look at this and say, oh, sound like this. Oh, this is good. Does that sound familiar? Where does that come from? That's in the Bible,
right,
right? And
right.
when we
From the
created
very
this
beginning.
from the very beginning, and we look at it, and that's that, like, the original creation of the ego. What if that was really what that was,
Right.
right? And so,
Well, the knowledge of good and evil is oh, I learned judgment. That's good.
yeah, fabulous, right? Versus unconditional love, right? So it's like, huh. And this is what we were talking last week about things being backwards, and we have, like, sort of a backwards world of this reflection that we've forgotten as a reflection.
Right.
Um, but, and so with that, we created history. We created what we perceive as good and bad, and that there's 5 bajillion different perspectives of what's good and bad. And how can we move forward out of this pattern until we flush out that history and say it's complete, and say, you know what? Fabulous, incredible, of course, because we are infinitely divine beings, or infinitely divine consciousness.
Right.
And look at that, it's complete. And now it's to be reassimilated. Well, then we, like, that's the body, the physical body mourning the death of that, when we have kidney issues or whatever,
Right. Right.
and things related to that. Also, at a collective level, I'm sure I'm, like, getting pinged that there's a physical representation of that here on Earth too, but I'm not quite getting it right at this moment. But there are ways that, like, and that's what has perpetuated us. That's what has continued to perpetuate us. And then it becomes like a cancer,
Mm-hmm. Right.
because it has mutated, and it's like, okay, it's living past its prime, right?
Well, and you also think about all the things that are going on in nature to rebalance, whether it's the weather patterns, whether it's the tectonic shifts. I mean, all of those things are just symptoms of the earth rebalancing itself.
Well, and that's what the kidneys are in the body, right? And when you look
Exactly.
at that whole Asian understanding and TCM,
Right.
it is, that's what the kidneys hold, the energy of fire and water together, which is very cleansing and flushing and purifying. And when we hold and clutch onto something, that's when we have disease.
Right. And one of its main emotions that it holds is fear.
Yes. Which is, oh my God, what happens if I lose this? Then what am I? Who am I? That's why we hold on to
I
history.
cease to exist. The ultimate fear.
Right. Which, I faced that when we did the sessions out there, and it was like, oh, now I got past that. I'm like, It's all good.
Right, yeah. What can I not do?
Right, right. So, yeah, that's a lot of that's a lot to chew on this week.
Right. Great Christmas cheer.
Yeah, Christmas and Yule cheer.
Right.
So the I would say that today we work on that, allowing like whatever there is for us so that we get to a place where we allow that physical flushing to allow it to be healthy and vibrant and flowing, and for us to realize, to allow the freedom for us to realize our own infinite power, our infinite consciousness and presence, um, in doing that, and also committing ourselves to that nourishment,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because in committing ourselves to that nourishment is to do this because it's for us to come to that epitome of
Right.
the exalted version of ourselves, to complete all of this, to move into
It
our next creation.
translates into nourishment in every moment.
Yes. Well, and how we don't nourish ourselves if we are holding on to history that is not in this moment.
Absolutely. So no matter what you're doing, it's like bailing the ocean with a bucket. Let it go.
Let it go. I don't know that song. I don't even know that song is big. I don't even know the song. I think I saw Frozen once. So
I haven't seen it at all, but I know the song.
So yeah, so whatever it is for us to be able to shift that within ourselves, right?
Right.
To recognize and know as a gift to ourselves, that remembrance of our ability to nurture, to be complete, to be unconditional love, to be completely present,
Mm-hmm.
free of history, flushed out all the way down to the cells and beyond, right? That feels so good.
Oh,
Oh, I can feel that working already.
I know, I can too.
All right, so let's go. You ready?
Ready.
Well, that was fabulous.
That was amazing.
I saw stuff flesh out and I saw this channel of course, my cat came in and started chirping at me in the middle of this. What are you doing? But I saw this almost like this our arteries almost but collective just open up, right? And just stuff started flooding through. And I saw all these, I guess you'd call them what people call light codes, just of all this stuff coming up to the surface that we'd forgotten. I was like, it was almost breathtaking. I was like, ooh. And so I'm all tingly now. That was really cool. I'm going to be sitting on that.
Yeah, no kidding. I saw at first it was like I went down to the cellular level and saw everything just open up. And again, like the arteries for you. And I saw the cells actually breathing, like breathing out what's to be released and breathing in the love. And it was, I marveled at the space.
Yes.
Cellular level. And I was like, yes, just like out in the stars. I mean, it was that vast, but it was inside.
Yeah.
And then I felt just this rhythm in it. And I would see the infinity symbol, but it was the breathing in, the breathing out, and everything was just flowing. And it was just like, oh, I could get lost in
this. Yes. Yes. Yeah, that felt incredible.
Yes.
Oh. Yasmin says yes in all caps.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, so yeah, what a great, and I felt like it was funny because a lot of us look at the representation of what today is, right? You have Yule, you have the whole the planet thing coming together,
right.
What they're calling the Christmas star thing, or
right.
And many are calling it the opening of the door to the age of Aquarius and whatever. It's yes, it's time for us to flush everything from before and step fully into the present of what's now and beyond. That is so beautiful, right?
It really is.
And feels so incredibly freeing, right? And part of it is this flushing out and allowing, because when we do that, oh yeah, just the expansiveness felt just incredible.
It really did. And to know that's inside of something that you think is so small. It's just my body. It's just everything.
Right. Exactly. Ooh. I Oh, well, happy Yule, Merry Christmas. We missed Hanukkah last week, but all of that. Happy Age of Aquarius and moving forward and to our
happy present moment.
Happy present moment, as Yasmin always says, happy present, good present. So have a fabulous whatever you celebrate this week.
Happy celebrating you.
Happy celebrating you. Oh, that feels so good to even just say that.
Right? I know it does. Yeah. It does.
So with love from us to you, have a great one. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni
signing off with this week's Ascender World. See you next time.